Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, your ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with
Dan, the ambassador of nonsense.
And
hello, everybody.
Folks, I really got to apologize for last week. I could not even listen to last week's recording because of it just kept thumping, and I guess I didn't realize how loud it was, and I guess I didn't realize how much I move around when I'm talking. Because with this microphone, it just picks up everything. I mean,
because through the phone you sounded fine.
Yeah, but the mic was sitting on the desk, and so if I typed something on the keyboard, it was like dum 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 dum. It was terrible, and I would have said, we need to do that over, but actually, it was a pretty good podcast.
Content-wise. Yeah, I felt like it was, too. I was happy with that one.
There was some funny sections, and it was a good podcast. I didn't want to redo it because you can't fake some things. Right. So I'm just going to leave it, and if you can get through it, fine. If not, then I would understand.
Okay. Well, this one will be better anyway.
Hopefully, because I've made some changes, and hopefully you won't have to endure what happened last week. What are, let's see. Oh, you told me to pick out Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale.
That's what I got. That's right.
Established 1999.
Kentucky Bourbon Barrel. Yep, and it's brewed by the Lexington Brewery and Distillery. One of the few combination brewery and distilleries in the world. It was founded by a guy named Pierce Lyons, who's a Irish entrepreneur. And the flagship product was Kentucky Ale, or Kentucky Irish Red Ale, which was just designed to be a very good, solid, drinkable Irish-style red ale. And it was later, after I don't know whether it was that he acquired or they merged with the Lexington Distillery or what, but they got the idea to start aging their ale in some bourbon barrels. And that's what the Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale is. So it's the Kentucky Red Irish Ale aged in bourbon barrels. He also owns his company is Alltech. He's actually it's like an agricultural company, but he also owns a distillery in Dublin, Ireland, that is housed in I don't think it's a working church anymore, but it's St. James Church that stretches back to the 12th century or something like that. And if you go to Ireland, you can take a tour of that too.
I wonder if they use the same recipes.
I don't know. For the whiskey they might, although I doubt it, because in Ireland it would just be whiskey, so they would be expected to be an Irish whiskey, whereas here they're distilling and producing bourbon specifically. Obviously, being in Kentucky, that's what they would do. I took a tour of their place in Lexington. It was pretty neat.
Huh. So this is this is an Irish red ale.
Yes.
Brewed in bourbon barrels.
That has then brewed, and then after it's completely finished as a beer, they age it for 2 to 6 months in bourbon barrels. After the bourbon has been, so it soaks up some of the bourbon from the wood.
Yeah. Okay. It's not too bad.
No, it's their original flagship product was the Irish Red Ale, but this is now considered their mainline product. And by the way, do you remember that at Dad's birthday when I bought him all of that? Kathy and I got together and we got him all that beer that said Dad's beer on it. Yeah. She bought a bunch of labels. That was this.
Okay. I didn't drink any of that.
He really likes this. Yeah. No, Dad really likes this. Although
I think it's all gone. You got him
it was probably gone. It was probably gone within a few weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
anyway,
today are we still doing religious liberty?
You know what? Let's go ahead and do that. And specifically, this is kind of something that just has been bothering me. And the more, here's why it's interesting to me, because it pulls me in two separate directions. on the one hand, I've got the sort of, I've always had that sort of anti-establishment bent to me that not so much anti-establishment, but sort of a almost libertarian that, I want to reject this idea that people can tell you what to do kind of thing,
right.
But at the same time, there's wording in, specifically, I want to talk about the Vatican II document, Dignitatis Humanae, which is Latin for the dignity of man, that sort of defines the modern church concept of religious liberty and the right to religious liberty and what it means. And I think that there are some real problems in the document, and I think that when you get around to kind of analyzing it and paring it down and saying, okay, what is really being said here, you get to a point where it's like the document itself is kind of useless because it can't really mean what a lot of people might take it to mean. But by the time you pare it down and figure out what it could really possibly mean, you end up with, oh, well, that's just the traditional understanding in the Catholic Church anyway.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to being a useless document.
I think, what's his name? Taylor Marshall calls it weaponized ambiguity because later it can be used to say all kinds of things that really are not true.
Right, exactly.
At the same time, we can hold our head and say, hey, wait a minute, no, it doesn't say that. If you translate it in light of tradition, then really this is what it means, which is almost nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I'll start talking about it and talking about some quotes from it in different sections and giving my thoughts, and maybe you might have some responses. I don't know if you've really thought much about this as even as a topic. You know that I, for a time, I'll say flirted with, like hanging out with people like, what was his name even? Jason Miller.
Yeah.
With the kind of the trad movement, and of course part of the whole religious liberty trajectory of the modern church is one of the things that they kind of call on in order to sort of show that the modern church is not really the church, that there's a discontinuity of teaching and that kind of stuff. And I think I even mentioned this with the Galileo thing we were talking about last time. It's like, even if you can like pull like one particular statement out of a pope or a church, an office that's governed by the pope or whatever, and you say, oh, that one particular statement is wrong within the a specific context, that's not really how the general infallibility, what we call the ordinary magisterial infallibility of the church works. You look at the long-standing teaching of the church, and so that doesn't really perturb me at that, but of course back then I had a lot more of a legalistic approach to thinking about those kinds of things, and it did bother me.
If you have a pope who says something and defines it as doctrine, and it goes against what has been previously declared as doctrine, well, even that one statement would be problematic.
It would be.
Wouldn't
it? Yes. And I believe, it's like I said last week, I believe Galileo's affair was like the closest the church has ever come to that, or at least 5 years ago I would have said that.
Right.
I think with some of the things that the current pope is coming out with, especially like his, for example, the thing about the death penalty. Okay, he didn't really define it as a doctrine. He just directed that the catechism be rewritten.
Right.
In a way that makes the catechism now basically heretical. but he didn't quite take it to that point where, Vatican I defined, it defined like a set of circumstances in which the Pope himself, in the office of the papacy, is infallible. Not just in union with bishops or anything like that, but in himself. Well, the current Pope has not entered into that sort of inner sanctum of the execution of his office to define something that's heretical at this point.
It's like instead of defining a teaching, he commanded us to teach something that was heretical. But
that kind of a weird sort of exactly. But Dignitatis Humanae is a different kind of animal because it's a council document that is it was endorsed by the Pope and it had a number of signatories among the bishops who attended the council. It's also in in fact, all of the council documents in this sense are a bit of an odd duck in this sense. The documents themselves, within their internal wording, might seem to indicate that their intention is to define something or to at least develop the doctrinal definition of certain things.
Which documents are you talking about? Vatican II?
Yes, Vatican II, specifically.
Okay.
However, I think, and I haven't looked up the quote, I'll have to go find that. If somebody writes into our podcast and says, hey, you were quoting things without sources, I'll go find the source. But anyway, I think Pope Paul VI basically said that there was no doctrinal development or statements in Vatican II. Nothing was defined new in Vatican II.
Because he said it was kind of pastoral.
A pastoral council only. Exactly. So it's kind of one of those things where you look at some of the things and it's like, wow, it looks like they're being dogmatic here, but then you've got the words of the Pope that no, they're not really being dogmatic. So, and John the 23rd started the council, and I think I'm going to go ahead and check this timeline up.
While you're doing that, it's almost like you've got the teacher in the class who makes all the rules, and then she has to leave, and she says, all right, Joe here's in charge until I get back, meaning he's gonna tattle on you if you break the rules.
Yeah.
And suddenly Joe starts walking around and saying, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it's like, well, you don't really have the authority to do that, and she didn't really give you the authority to do that. You're just saying it, and you say it in a way that makes it sound like we have to do it, but we don't really have to do it.
It's kind of like that. In fact, and this is what I was looking up. So John the 23rd convoked the council, but Paul VI is who presided over its the closing of the council, and it's Paul VI. I guess I don't know what the right word is, but endorsement of the council documents that applies. And so, since he himself said these are not doctrinal documents, the council was not a doctrinal council, then that's what should, apply in our treatment of them in terms of, okay, what are they really supposed to indicate? So, that's just kind of a sort of a background to the council itself. One of the documents that came out of that council is called Dignitatis Humanae, which is the, on human dignity, or of human dignity. That is the one that defines what they call religious liberty. And at the very beginning of the document, they say some things that seem kind of problematic. And when you start working through the document, you get to a point where you're thinking like, okay, well, wait a minute. Everything that was problematic in the beginning and everything that might have been controversial, say, with regards to the traditional church's understanding at the beginning, has just been like undermined and cut out by the way that the document developed.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that there's going to be anything earth-shattering in anybody's spiritual life from this podcast. It's just one of those things that has bugged me, so I want to talk about it.
So on top of what we were just saying about the council itself and how much authority it had and how much it did or didn't define doctrine, on top of that, we have the benefit of looking back on it. And we can see how it developed and what really happened ever since then. And we can see that it did a lot of damage, or it seemed to.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a half a century since the council. We can see that the fruits of the council are not what you would call sweet. I guess, the fruits of the council itself are pretty rotten when you come right down to it. So, and that was one. Jesus said, "By their fruits you shall know them."
Well, Ty, you know what? Okay, speak on freedom for a minute, because I mean, we've always been kind of borderline libertarian, but a true libertarian, I think, would say there should be no law. Practically anarchism.
Practically, yeah. And it's kind of funny because my alternate, if I couldn't pull my thoughts together enough to do this podcast, there's another thing that I've been thinking about. I've got this framework of thinking about. I hate to use the word, but social justice.
Yeah.
But this framework that I've kind of been thinking through for the last couple of weeks, and part of it, like a small part of it, shows kind of like this concept of obligation that you have towards, you have obligations one to another as human beings, just the obligations to your fellow man. That individually, though, that as you encounter them as individuals, they're basic obligations of maybe civility and so on and so forth. And then there are obligations that individuals have to the community, not just expediences of it's nicer if people live this way, but actual obligations and obligations that the community has to the individuals that make up the community. Yeah. And it was kind of in thinking about this framework that I kind of happened on the thought that the reason I'm not really a full libertarian is that I think a libertarian would be someone who just denies that arrow of obligation from the individual to the community.
Yeah.
And I'm not there, obviously, and I'm not tending there either. But that's the point that I think separates us from real libertarians, is that we still believe there's some obligation that we have as individuals to the community. What form that takes and how that compares and gets prioritized and put into a hierarchy with other kinds of obligations we might have. Okay, that's something that when we go and talk about that with a lot of other people, we may end up looking like libertarians, but that's what keeps us from being libertarians in my mind.
There's also it's a very Catholic idea that, I got to think about this for a second. I was drinking and now I can't.
It's kind of funny. I'm in the same way. I'm going to apologize up front, everybody. As the ambassador of nonsense, I may be delivering some real nonsense. I haven't had any more to drink than I normally would, but this is Good Friday.
So you haven't eaten at all?
All day.
Well, I normally drink nothing, and now I've had 3/4 of a beer, and believe it or not, 3/4 of a beer for me is a lot. So,
I believe it.
Let's see. We were talking about the obligation a man genuinely has for the community around him.
Right.
And look, the church has always taught that man is a social being, and that he owes something to the people around him, and that this is just part of the human existence. If you deny these things, then you deny
can't really be a Christian.
You're going to talk. Man's selfishness is what takes over.
Right.
And
exactly.
Selfishness is not what makes society better. Man I think sometimes man will choose to do unselfish things, but if left to himself, even with, if you take away things like social shaming and things like that, I think without some kind of authority saying you should do this, it leads us down a path to chaos and anarchy.
Right. I mean, and that's an important part of raising kids, is train them in a sense of obligation to the community. Not just a sense of, okay, well, I've got my morals, and as long as I follow my morals, I don't have any obligation to anybody else. Part of those morals should include this more sense of belonging and therefore obligation.
Because, and this is especially for Catholics, nations will be judged as nations, not just people in nations.
Right.
In the end, communities will be held accountable for the things they do as communities, which means sometimes you have to try to step up and make changes in your community for the better.
Right.
Even if
I mean, yeah, you
parts
don't
of the
think
community are fighting.
You look at a state like New York, that puts on public display their extreme abortion laws. And you don't think that the Catholics and Christians who live in the state of New York are not going to be called to a high standard of what did you do to make your community, your state, into a righteous state when it was so completely offensive to God.
Even showing up at these things with a sign and saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't all of us. This is a couple of people in the State Department making decisions for all of us. But as a community, many of us reject it because, it was Abraham arguing for Sodom and Gomorrah, wasn't it? Who said, if I can find one just man.
Yeah, he said, look, give me a chance, God. I'll find somebody who, you're not going to destroy everybody just for the sake of a few, right? And God kept giving him that, go ahead, find 50, find 40, find 30.
There could have been
and so on.
50 people there who were, quote, good people, but they didn't stand up and try to change the community as a whole, so they lost out.
That's right.
Maybe
God
they
judged the whole of them.
Right. Because the, quote, good people didn't do what was good, which would be some formal protest that could be seen and shown that to somehow go against the grain there.
That's kind of interesting. And an interesting take on the fates of Sodom and Gomorrah, that people usually treat it as though there weren't any righteous people in the city, but that's not necessary. The Scripture doesn't actually say that. They just say that Abraham couldn't find them, and that makes the point. They may have been there, but by not standing up,
some little old lady
along with the rest,
standing in front of a bathhouse saying, "Hey, this is wrong. Put your clothes on." Maybe Sodom and Gomorrah wouldn't have been destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for her sake. Exactly. Yeah.
So I think we should thank God right now for these little old ladies who are standing down in front of abortion clinics saying, hey, this is wrong.
Planned Parenthoods. That's right. Yep, little old ladies like our mother, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Our mom's been arrested like 6 times for protesting abortion. She's one of the few people left still standing in front of the clinics on Saturday mornings saying the rosary.
Right, right. It's and the long termers. I mean, okay, there's a few that are not, but for the most part, I think the long termers tend to be Catholics.
Yeah,
that's just an interesting. Okay.
Now, so we talk about freedom itself. There's got to be some kind of law over it. And usually the next question is, how is that? Who decides that law? Is this and where does that law come from? If we're going to put rules on people, where should the rules come from?
Yeah, that's, well, and that's one of those things. I mean, I will not attempt to answer that question here quite. Because I think that there's a lot of when you ask that question, first of all, there's the you've got this idea of behaving badly. I mean, there's a million different ways that people can behave badly, but it's not necessary to say that it's wrong for one person to behave in a particular way is not necessarily equivalent to saying that it's okay for a group of people, say his city government or state government, to prohibit him from behaving in that way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So the fact that you don't really have inherently a right, for example, to do something that's wrong, but that doesn't necessarily give the government the right to prohibit you from doing that. Mm-hmm. And then you take one step back from there, and it's like, okay, so you've got these things that even though there may be questions of right and wrong, the government may not have a right to determine what it's going to enforce as right and wrong. On some cases, maybe because it's, in order to do so would involve too much micromanagement in the individual lives of men. In other cases, it may be because governments as governments aren't necessarily competent to determine what's right and wrong. But then there's this broader circle of things where you say, okay, strictly speaking, a government might have the right to, prohibit this or that, especially if the government was a very a Christian-informed government that had the correct sense of what's right and what's wrong, and it may have the right to then prescribe certain activities, but it might not be necessarily prudent to do so. It might be that allowing the general workings and flow of society and allowing the operations of, say, the church within society, it's better to back off a little bit on some of those things. The one I don't agree with this example, but the example that I think like Thomas Aquinas people might come up with is that I think he indicated that there may be circumstances in societies in which it might be permissible to the government officials of that city or state to allow, for example, houses of prostitution. Okay, well, knowing today what we know about, and I don't think in medieval times this probably wasn't the case as much as it is today, but today knowing what we know about human trafficking and that kind of stuff, right? I don't think there's any case anywhere in the world where it should actually be permissible. I think any government official who actually contributes to or allows, within his ability to do so, allows it to be, a business or an industry within his, scope of jurisdiction, is offending God in today's environment. But that's an example of there may be things that, okay, you do have the as a government the right to
like
keep people from doing this.
Would be a better
that
example.
Might be another one. Yeah, that could be another. That might be one today. It's like, okay, well, you probably, governments probably have the right to, from a Christian point of view, to prohibit the sale and distribution of condoms. Prudentially, maybe they might not want to do that, even, from a Christian analysis of the prudence of doing so. That's so there's that kind of thing too.
One of the things that the people and any historian in the 1200s would still have been able to do this, but it seems like now we have an even greater opportunity to look back on when things were suddenly allowable in societies, and then to watch what happened to that society
Yeah.
to see the effects.
Exactly.
And we see that a lot of the sins that traditionally Catholics outlawed were sooner or later able to do. Okay, something like divorce. I mean, that was, at one time, you couldn't get a divorce. And then it got to where you could get a divorce maybe if you had a lot of money, and eventually everyone can get a divorce. And you look at what we've got now, where most kids don't have a real set of parents.
Right. Yeah.
And
exactly.
look at what it's doing to society. And there's no way you can look at that and say, well, it's because of this or that, and if people would do this, then this wouldn't happen. No, if you just eliminated the divorce, then a huge number of problems would not exist.
Yeah.
Now you would have occasionally you would have women who are battered or kids who are battered. Children.
Yeah, but but now look at how women are treated and how kids are treated. Yeah, you haven't solved the one problem, and you've created a whole lot more problem.
Right.
That's yeah. I think that there are. I think people in the 12th and 13th centuries might have had a harder time. I don't think they would have had as much data, and I don't think they would have had as easy access to the kind of data to be able to do. You know,
we're a numbers society.
Exactly. I was going to say it's kind of more of a modern thing to become so obsessed with numbers and statistics, to where you can analyze things like that. They had to, in the 13th and 12th centuries, they had to do a lot more of analyzing things in the objects of the acts themselves. And okay, wait a minute, is this a good thing? And what could it lead to? And is that, is the situation that it could ameliorate more serious than the situation that it could cause? And, a lot of more hypothetical, speculative. What's interesting is how often the conclusions that they came up with in terms of the moral conclusions for public policy and so on and so forth kind of are borne out in our modern statistics driven. It's like you could almost use the statistics from modern times to go back and uphold and prove the moral judgments from the Middle Ages.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got popes through the ages. Let's see, Pope Gregory, and I get, for a long time, something like religious liberty wasn't even a consideration.
Yeah. No.
It's the same way capital punishment was not a consideration. We just, of course, you put criminals to death. What else would you do with them? And governments were Catholic or Protestant or pagan, and so naturally the laws would reflect that. But starting in like 1832 with Gregory the 16th, and we got something from 1864, 1888, 1953. All of them seem to reject the idea of civil religious liberty.
Right. And so that's what kind of, I look at the concept of call it a right to religious freedom, and I came up with three models that of that right that you could kind of ascribe to. One of them is what I call the irresponsible model, and it's the idea that everybody has the right to act in the fulfillment of their own religious observances, even when those actions violate the broader sensibilities of the society, or even violate the law as the law might otherwise apply. But then you have to suspend the law if when it comes to specific religious observances.
Right, we've got that going on a lot.
We have that. I mean, that's like, I think the big the court case that kind of like really sort of opened the door for that was something where, I mean, there was a law against what's that cactus? I think it's a cactus chemical thing, peyote. That's what it is. The American Indian Indian
like
version of pot, basically. Yeah, or maybe not even, maybe stronger than pot, maybe. But anyway, peyote. So, I mean, it was, outlawed. But then as some part of American Indian religious ritual, they have to smoke this peyote pipe, whatever. And the Supreme Court ended up ruling that because it was a religious ritual, they had to be allowed to do it. It's like, okay, well, what other things are you going to say? Well, this is against the law, but if it's part of a religious observance, well, then you have to be allowed to do it.
Right. It got to the point of just absurdity when we've got
my religious
prisoners
observance is
who
to
say,
slaughter...
I need conjugal visits. And some of the prison systems are bowing down to that, allowing conjugal visits because this prisoner has to have them as part of his religion.
For a religious thing? Yeah. Well, I mean, what if somebody is, somebody could claim that part of his religious observance is to, sacrifice chickens in the public square and sprinkle the blood on naked acolytes or something like that. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, well, it's a religious observance. You have to allow it, right? That's the irresponsible. It's the one that says, okay, well, whatever it is that your particular religious beliefs say that you should do, you should be allowed to do. Mm-hmm. And that's it's kind of, when I look at Dignitatis Humanae, if you look at the very, it's part 2. A lot of the Vatican documents are divided into parts. Each part has a few paragraphs. But part 2 says, this Vatican Council declares that the human person has a right to religious freedom. Now listen to this. This freedom means that all men are to be immune from coercion on the part of individuals or of social groups and of any human power in such wise that no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs, whether privately or publicly, whether alone or in association with others. Now,
it's a pretty wide blanket.
The qualifying statement is within due limits, which is weird. It's like, okay, wait a minute. What is that? Now, I'll get back to that in a minute because that almost seems to be like the very definition of what I'm calling the irresponsible view of religious freedom. And
yeah.
The second view of religious freedom is what I'm calling the gilded view of religious freedom. You know what gilding means, right? Castration, like animal, like a gilded horse. A gelding would be a horse that's been castrated.
Okay.
So the gilded view of religious freedom is basically that everybody has the right to act according to his religious observance within the bounds of law and expectation of society, and only in the interior he has the right to act upon whatever beliefs he has. But externally, his rights end at the right of society to make whatever laws they make. So this is basically the religious freedom. This is like the Obama religious freedom that you remember Obama basically lied to Cardinal Dolan. He told Cardinal Dolan, we're not going to put birth control onto the mandatory coverage for insurance because we know that would violate the consciences of Christians. Well, he lied, and he intended to do it all along, and he went ahead and did it. And then he and his various liberal Democrat acolytes, including, Catholic senators and stuff, said, well, we're not asking anybody to violate your conscience. Why? Because you can believe whatever you want to believe. Okay, well, that's a gilded sense of religious freedom. That is, just it's a disgustingly weak concept of religious freedom.
Because the practice of religion is a public thing. It's not
exactly.
It's not just something you believe.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's something that Dignitatis Humanae actually does bring up in the document, and this is one of the things that it's that I would commend. It says the freedom of or immunity from coercion in matters religious is to be recognized as a person's right when they act in community. Religious communities are a requirement of social nature, both of man and religion itself. In addition, it comes within the meaning of religious freedom that religious communities should not be prohibited from freely undertaking to show the special value of their doctrine in what concerns the organization of society, and inspiration of the whole of human activity. So now you're saying, okay, they're very definitely in Dignitatis Humanae not doing the gilded version of religious freedom. They're saying that this applies in public and as a social activity, which kind of then brings you back to are they doing the irresponsible version of religious liberty? Because it really sounds like they are. And there's there's two things in that definition I read. It says, no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs, which to me is a very broad permissive scope. And then whether alone in or association with others within due limits, which is vague and ambiguous. But then they go on to say, it is in accordance with their dignity as persons, that is, beings endowed with reason and free will, and therefore privileged to bear personal responsibility, that all men should be at once impelled by nature and bound by a moral obligation to seek the truth, especially religious truth. They are also bound to adhere to the truth once it is known, and to order their whole lives in accord with the demands of truth. However, they cannot fully discharge these obligations in a manner in keeping with their own nature unless they enjoy the immunity from external coercion, as well as psychological freedom. Therefore, the right to religious freedom has its foundation not in the subjective disposition of the person, but in his very nature. In consequence, the right to this immunity continues to exist even in those who do not live up to their obligation of seeking the truth and adhering to it. And then they have another backpedal clause, provided that the just public order be observed. Now, to me, that sounds like, if I really look at that, it's like if I ignore the previous paragraph about no one being compelled to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs, this paragraph sounds like you have the right to seek and adhere to the truth, and your right to seek and adhere to the truth continues even if you don't seek and adhere to the truth. But there is only one truth, and that's the truth as understood, as taught by the Catholic Church. So this kind of brings up the question, does this concept inform the due limits from above? Then maybe due limits include that regardless of a person living up to his obligation, his beliefs are consonant with seeking the truth. And then it leads me to ask if one's own thoughts aren't the result of living up to a moral obligation to seek the truth. In other words, religious liberty says you have to be free to act according to your own beliefs. But if you personally are not acting in an obligation to seek the truth, if instead you're concocting a system of beliefs that merely serves your own desires, then are those really your own beliefs? Can they even be included in that description of religious liberty if that's how you're doing it? So just kind of a question that comes into play there. So we get on to part 3 of Dignitatis Humanae, and it says, on his part, man perceives and acknowledges the imperatives of the divine law through the mediation of conscience. Okay, so now they're bringing this concept of conscience into it. It follows that he is not to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his conscience. All right, so the document itself doesn't actually define conscience, but a lot of times, in modern times especially, people like to define conscience as, conscience is that sort of interior movement that makes me want to do one thing rather than another. It's that sense of what I ought to be doing, and that sense of what I'm allowed to do as well. That's my conscience. But that's not what conscience is in the tradition of Catholic thinking. Conscience is an act of reason by which we apply general principles of morality to specific situations. So, when we know that it's wrong to steal, that's the general principle. And, we're looking at somebody dropped a $20 bill out of their purse while they were putting their groceries away, and they didn't notice it. And that act of reasoning by which we say, to just grab that and hold on to it, which is justly theirs, is an act of stealing, and that's wrong, and therefore we shouldn't do that. That's what conscience is. Conscience isn't just that interior movement of, hey, I feel like I ought to do this, or I feel like I ought to be allowed to do that.
Because that's where we've come up with psychopaths and different neurological disorders that wherein men, quote, don't have a conscience. But if they have reason, they do have a conscience.
Yeah, like
and they are still capable of getting to heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
Just by following what they reasonably know is good.
Right. There's a kid that my son listens to. I say a kid. Everybody who's under 30 is a kid to me. So I hope nobody who hears this takes offense. But there's a guy that my son listens to. He's not Catholic, but he's a Christian. The thing is, he is a diagnosed sociopath. But that, psychological, perhaps neurological disorder doesn't keep him from recognizing and applying the truth of the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of what you were just saying. Another one that it's kind of funny. Once in a while, Hollywood comes up with things that, even if on the overall trend, they don't really, there's obviously nothing intentionally Christian about them. But have you ever watched any of the episodes of the series called Dexter?
No, I think I watched the first one or two. We stopped watching. Is that that psycho killer who
kills other psycho killers?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I saw like half the first episode.
Okay. So he is a he's a sociopath and a serial killer. He only kills other serial killers. His dad kind of recognizing, and by the way, this could, where this ended up is not a acceptable, valid Christian approach. And I don't want anybody to hear me say that it is. This isn't where I'm going with this. But you learn through the series that his dad, seeing his, problem, kind of the way he was, worked to embed in him a code which served as the higher level principles and guidance by which he would moderate and direct and channel those, particular psychopathic needs that he had. I'm kind of putting it into the parlance of the show itself. But it's interesting because that's exactly what conscience is. He was given a code. He understood the code. The code was general, and he used it and he applied it to specific circumstances such that when he did execute his various, deeds of homicide, they were at least within the structures according to the code, justified, and he stayed within that code. He didn't stray. Well, guess what? He's exercising conscience.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not a well-informed conscience necessarily, because it does allow him to kill people, even if those people are already killers themselves, but it is a conscience. So the thing is, this document then brings conscience into the discussion. It says that no one is to be restrained from acting in accordance with his conscience, especially in matters religious. But if conscience is the mechanism by which we apply principles of truth to the specific circumstances, then couldn't we ask, and couldn't we sort of charge this document, Dignitatis Humanae, with the question of, doesn't that imply that an individual in question has been successful in uncovering the general principles of truth? So now you're back to this concept of you have a right to live rightly, if you read it that way, which is, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of goes, I've always looked at religious liberty in this way. Without it, Catholics are going to be thrown in prison.
Persecuted. Yeah, thrown to the lions. Exactly.
That's always what happened. It's what's happening right now.
Right.
I mean, not. It's happening in other countries right now, and it's on its way in America.
Into
now,
America, yes, absolutely.
Starting to sound crazy, but I mean, it's on its way because there are certain things Catholics can't do. For example, have an abortion.
Mm-hmm. Or perform an abortion.
Right. Or in some cases, you might even say sell contraception. Right. There are people losing their license because they wouldn't sell contraceptions. There are pharmacists who would lose their license if they didn't sell the morning after pill.
Right, exactly.
Those kinds of things, religious liberty doesn't really count for much if that's what's happening, because then there's no religious liberty. If I can't practice my religion because someone else doesn't like it, then there is no religious liberty. So all the talk about letting people follow their consciences doesn't really amount to much when good people can't follow their conscience.
Right.
And that seems to be the way society tends when we start talking about religious liberty. The more liberal the state becomes, the less freedom a Catholic has.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of weird because it's like the more liberty is given to acting in ways that are neither religious nor right, and the less liberty is given to acting in ways that are religious and right.
I think it was Chesterton who said something like the religious liberty is there so that men can choose to do good. It's not there so that men can choose to do bad.
Right.
But we turn it around in today's society to where men can choose to do bad, but good men are prohibited from doing good.
Right. Exactly. That's so, and that kind of, I think that kind of feeds into my last part. So I've gone in part 2 and part 3, and I'm not going to talk about the whole document. It's not a long document. It's worth reading, but I take that back. It's not worth reading. If you're really into this stuff and you want to analyze it in light of tradition, then it's
or
worth
if you want to have a discussion,
it's worth picking apart. Yeah,
at a party or something, and you want to sound smart, then go ahead and read it so that you can recall certain. Well, it says this.
Yeah. So in part 7, it says the right to religious freedom is exercised in human society. Hence, its exercise is subject to certain regulatory norms. In the use of all freedoms, the moral principle of personal and social responsibility is to be observed. In the exercise of their rights, individual men and social groups are bound by the moral law to respect both the rights of others and for their own duties towards others and for the common welfare of all. Men are to deal with their fellows in justice and civility. Okay, that presupposes, in my mind, an undergirding existing kind of a priori before the construction of laws that might enact religious freedom, a basic religious understanding, or at least a basic understanding of what is the truth and what is good. And so it's more like, what if your beliefs don't compel you to deal with your fellows in justice and civility, for example? But Dignitatis Humanae is stating right there that there has to be a grounding in a preconceived, or at least higher conceived notion of what is acceptable as a conscientious act in religious matters. And it says, furthermore, society has the right to defend itself against possible abuses committed on the pretext of freedom of religion. So the limits of religious freedom
that could mean anything.
Are understood within reference. It says it is the special duty of government to provide this protection. However, government is not to act in an arbitrary fashion or in an unfair spirit of partisanship. Its action is to be controlled by the juridical norms which are in conformity with the objective moral order. So the limits on religious freedom are understood in reference to the objective moral order. And
where do we get the objective moral order?
Well, here's the thing. This comes to my third understanding of religious freedom. I've talked about the irresponsible one, that everybody can act as however they want as long as it's in part of a religious observance. The gilded one, which is everybody can believe whatever they want as long as they don't act in a way that offends people outside. And the traditional one, which says the Catholic faith is the true faith revealed by God. Everyone has the right to the freedom to pursue that truth and to act in accordance with that truth as discovered, which is exactly back to what every Catholic believed before Vatican II.
Yeah. The
so
thing is that
I think this document, I don't know, I feel like this document is a worthless document.
It seems like a lot of Vatican II documents you can go through this way. Because they leave these little hangers in there like that, I'm looking for the quote again. Proper guardianship of public morality. Need for a proper guardianship of public morality. Well, what is that? I mean, that could be anything. And generally, if you're Catholic, you're going to translate that to mean the Catholic Church.
Right.
The thing is, to talk about this today in 2020 in an American society it's almost laughable. To think that maybe the Catholic Church ought to be making our laws, you can't even bring it up.
No.
But I think maybe we ought to do a podcast about American liberty and how it was different from all the other liberties. I mean,
I think we should.
The liberty to choose your faith in Canada is a lot different from the liberty to choose your faith in America. Mm-hmm. Because a Canadian can't preach against homosexuality. That's a hate crime.
Exactly. That's right. In American law, the very concept of a hate crime is anathema to the American understanding of human rights.
Right. I'm allowed to hate people.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're going to go with the American concept, then you got to allow me to hate people. I'm allowed. And the thing is, we've been slowly changing the way we look at these things, and it seems to be tending towards the thought crime. The 1984 version.
Yeah, kind of an Orwellian sense of.
At first, it was social, but it's becoming law now.
Right.
Little by little, and for a while, I thought, for the past couple of years, I thought maybe that's going to turn around. With Trump coming out and just pouncing all these political speech activists. And saying all the things we're not supposed to say. And I thought, well, maybe we're going to go back to the old ways where I'm allowed to hate people if I want. But I don't, you never know. I don't know what's going on right now. I mean, with the COVID-19 stuff, I just,
it's
I'm
kind of like everything is on hold anyway. Yeah. I
like all the things I thought are looking like maybe I was wrong.
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, you've got, at the very least, you have to admit that the whole COVID-19 thing has thrown it's a curveball even for Trump. No matter what his intentions are, it's a curveball and he has to figure out how to deal with it. And it's not something that you can expect him to necessarily figure that out, in real time in just a couple of weeks. He has to, you got to give him a chance. He did just announce this task force on reopening the reopening the country.
Is this bringing us to current events?
I wonder if it is.
Are you done?
Because I kind of got through my Dignitatis Humanae. I gave my 3 models of religious freedom, and I said, well, if you really analyze it in all of its text, the third one is the one that you understand it as, which means it's basically nothing new. So
Yeah, same thing we've always taught.
I'm done.
Look, Trump has always. I don't know how to say this. I'm really disappointed in him. I thought of him as one way, and the way he's dealt with this COVID-19 thing has been the way I would have expected George Bush or even Obama to deal with it, or Clinton or anyone else. There's this group of experts telling him he's got a shot. We didn't elect them as experts. I didn't vote for him.
Yeah.
But I did find one way, and we talked about it a little bit last week, but I got to flesh this out. I did find one way, maybe this is what he's doing. Because it doesn't make sense. He knows they've been wrong about every single prediction they've made. None of the numbers that they talked about have come true. Why are they ever on TV? Why aren't we making fun of them? Why aren't they on Saturday Night Live? These experts.
Exactly. Right.
They're idiots. They've been wrong about everything. And they keep bringing us new numbers, and then we treat the new numbers as if they're gospel. That doesn't make any sense. And it would be one thing if it was just them, but Trump is listening to them. And he keeps giving them the spotlight and letting them talk. He didn't do this with anyone else. Why is he doing this? And I thought, well, maybe he lied to us. Maybe he is maybe he wanted to get the entire country behind him before, I don't know, lowering the axe and enacting this socialist state, which seems like what's going on here. And I thought of one thing this week that might explain it. And I don't know if it does explain it. And I wouldn't say that it excuses it, but I think maybe this is what's going on. From the very start, Trump has said we should not be relying on China for everything that's made here. For our medicine, for our automobiles, for our steel, for our electronics. This stuff should not be made in China. First of all, because China is our enemy and we should not be giving them money. Second of all, we should not be giving them our manufacturing secrets. And third of all, because we should not rely on them for anything.
Right.
We should be making this stuff here in America. We have the people, we have the natural resources, we have everything we need to make all these things. There's no reason we should ever get anything from another country. Well,
especially
I guess
not China.
Kinda. Yeah, especially not China, who hates us and who wants to take control of us.
We don't need to get any necessities from other countries, right?
When Reagan or when Lincoln started trying to rebuild the country, it was his idea that we should make all these things ourselves. We should not be getting them. We should not be importing them. Mm-hmm. And he would set up. He would make it, it's not like he himself came in and created industries, but he made laws so that manufacturers could go to places where the raw materials existed and set up their industries and start making things. So that's why you've got certain areas in the United States, even though we can ship this stuff all over the world, we've got certain areas that seem to be more or less dedicated to certain industries.
Right, right.
And that changed with people like Kissinger, who decided we're going to start dealing with China again. But Trump seems to be against all of that throughout his entire campaign. And Obama said these industries aren't coming back. You know, I heard him say it. A guy asked him in a campaign. It was like a town hall meeting. He said, "What about my job that did this or manufactured this? Are you going to bring these back?" And I heard him say, "That job's gone. You can't bring them job back. What are you going to do? Wave a magic wand?" And he's making fun of Trump.
Oh,
and
my.
Trump did it. Trump did it.
Yep.
He brought the jobs back.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem. These manufacturers, I think a lot of them would like to come back to the U.S., but at this point, all the people who could have worked for them have found other ways to make money. And so now what they're fighting for is workers.
Oh,
if they want to come back to the U.S., there's two solutions. One, somehow convince American workers to go work for them, or two, import the workers from Mexico and other places.
Right.
Which we've already decided we're against.
Yeah.
I mean, you can import some labor, but it makes usury easy when you import huge blocks of labor like that.
Right.
It makes it too easy for, it is
take advantage
slavery.
Of, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You kind of create a slave class.
It would be better if we found a way to get Americans to do these jobs. But Americans already have jobs. What if right now what Trump is doing is allowing the governors to make stupid mistakes, and he is telling them, you need to open up the country, you need to open up the country, you need to open up the country. He's saying that, but he's allowing everybody to make these stupid mistakes.
Right.
And, you know, here in Ohio, I don't care what Mike DeWine does at this point, a lot of businesses have ended because of his decisions.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to be unemployed permanently now because of him.
Same thing with Holcomb in Indiana.
Yeah. Directly responsible. Mm-hmm. But what is here suddenly is a workforce.
Yep.
We've got a workforce now who are hungry for jobs. All we need is manufacturers to come in and say, we're going to put a factory here. What if Trump is allowing that to happen?
Well, could be.
So that nothing is made in China anymore. Everything's made in here. Well, not everything, but, you know.
But, yeah. I mean, all the important stuff. I mean, we would still get Trochka from China, you know, little knickknacks and whatnot.
That's one way I can make sense of all this.
Could be.
I don't know if it's true, but...
Whether it's true or not, I mean, yeah, that certainly could be. I honestly, you know, I got to think, because, like, you know, I kind of like take it as a scaling aspect with my job. You know, my job, I'm, you know, by training, you know, engineer, and most of my career a software engineer, and I manage software projects, as well. Well, you know, it's like, okay, in the last couple of weeks, I've spent all of my time just on managing different aspects of this one software project. That it includes trying to get the team that report to me to stay on track and do the right thing. It includes, you know, having discussions with the client and trying to keep them happy. It includes shuffling documents back and forth between them to get signatures in place for regulatory reasons and stuff like that. And it's like a full-time job just doing that, leaving practically no time for any kind of long-term thought or planning. I can imagine that the President of the United States, you know, if I think of that in terms of 2 weeks and I think of him in terms of 2 months with the whole United States, okay, I still feel like even if you couldn't have come up with that scenario that you did, I feel like it would be unreasonable to draw conclusions at this time about him being either ineffective or have disingenuous, you know, about who he was as he was campaigning and stuff. I feel like this is too much of a curveball to be able to say, okay, based on what he's done in the last 2 months, I'm going to make judgments about him. I just don't feel like we can do that. However, your scenario is a reasonable one. It actually fits a lot with both things that he has said and things that have been going on.
Yeah. I guess, you know what, it boils down to what I said last week. We don't have anyone else, so we may as well stay behind Trump.
Go all in.
Because,
Yep.
I mean, so far he's done everything he said he would.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he's been real so far. He's been, what you see is what you get so far. I'm not willing to give that up yet.
Right. All right. On to the news. YouTube has said it will remove videos promoting a conspiracy linking 5G to COVID-19.
The 5G, like 5G conference of
bandwidth?
nations? Oh, 5G bandwidth?
Yeah, somehow there's a conspiracy theory that links 5G to COVID-19.
Oh, they should let that go just for the entertainment value.
Yeah, I would think so. But in
the fact that they're suppressing it makes me suspicious. As silly as that is,
it kind of makes you. Well, wait a minute, you're giving some credence to this.
Exactly.
At least 4 phone masts, or the giant towers or whatever. Or, not giant towers, because they don't have giant towers for these. 4 of the towers were set on fire.
Oh,
and,
my! Seriously?
Engineers are being threatened in
that's why they're
UK
doing that.
cities.
Okay, I get that. That's
I guess people are going kind of nuts over it.
That is really nuts. I mean, that's worse than the Corona beer connection that people, which was stupid in itself. I mean, how idiotic do you have to be? And I thought that was a joke when people were saying, "Oh yeah, people have stopped buying Corona beer," and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's funny," but apparently it's real.
Yeah,
it was real. Hopefully, I don't know.
Maybe we give people too much credit. I don't know, but it says that it's in UK cities that people are being threatened. So maybe it's not. It's a UK thing.
Maybe it's a UK thing. Well, it's like I keep going back. Anytime something stupid like that happens in the UK, I keep going back to what can you expect from a country where you have to buy a license to watch TV?
Right.
That's, it's like, okay, that's what they are.
Do you have to buy a license to visit a brothel in the UK?
A brothel? I don't know. Do they have?
We were talking about
brothel thing?
I thought there were in parts of the UK.
That's interesting. I don't know.
Oh well.
I could do the research and then my wife might find the research on my computer sometime because I don't hide, what I do, and trying to figure out about visiting brothels in the UK. We're planning at some point in time to take a trip.
We were going there, weren't we? So there were protesters in Ivory Coast, which is somewhere in Africa. Mm-hmm. They dismantled a COVID-19 testing center because they thought it would spread the virus through their district.
Oh, wow.
People are kind of going nuts with this, and
Wow.
I don't know. I'm just left scratching my head over all of this. I just can't believe people are taking it this seriously when we look at the number of deaths. It's so small.
Yeah.
Compared to even the flu. It's smaller than the flu right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
The COVID, I don't know. COVID, stupid 19. It's like the virus makes people stupid.
Yeah. Or the thought of the virus.
The thought of the virus. Yeah, the virus itself doesn't. It's the thought of the virus makes people stupid.
Yeah. Now, Wisconsin Supreme Court overturned Governor Tony Evers' order to postpone tomorrow's primary election. Well, I guess this was April 7th.
Oh, okay. Okay, so he wanted to postpone the primaries. Supreme Court
He
said,
wanted to postpone
nope.
the primaries, and the Supreme Court overturned him. Now, DeWine postponed the primaries, and I haven't heard of them happening now at all. But he got a court order not to postpone them, and he did anyway.
Oh, like a district court?
Right. The question is, will this be brought to the Ohio Supreme Court, and will he suffer any consequences for having ignored the courts?
Yeah, what will the remedy be if, because he did ignore the court order? Yeah, that's...
I mean, a lot of times Trump would do things, and then some stupid little judge would say, no, you can't do that. And instead of just ignoring the judge, Trump would fight it until it got to the Supreme Court, and then he would have that judge overruled or overturned.
Right.
DeWine did not do that. DeWine just ignored the judge.
Yeah. That'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
So I wonder what's going to happen there. I can't really say what I'm hoping for there, because on the one hand, I don't think these insignificant judges should be able to make decisions for everybody. On the other hand, Trump's been playing by the rules, and DeWine is not.
Yeah.
And I don't think the primaries should have been postponed. I think that's silly. But I guess that's in Wisconsin. We'll see what happens in Ohio now.
All right. Yep.
Do you know that George Pell? Have you followed the case of?
Yes, Australia Cardinal George Pell. He was released. Yeah, that's finally.
Okay. Now, there's like a billion other bishops out there who need to be arrested, so we'll have to wait for the other side of that justice.
Yeah.
So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that was such a surreal. The whole thing was so surreal that, I mean, when you know, if I don't know, you know, if you've read some of the summaries of the evidence and that kind of stuff, but it was like, you know,
I listened to half of a radio show about it, and it's one of those things that you just get frustrated because I can't do anything about it, and it just, you know, this injustice is happening and you can't do anything, so it's like I gotta stop listening, because it reminds me of Father Durger here in Cincinnati.
Oh.
Who was, were you there at the baptism where he did something funny? You weren't there.
I wasn't there, but I heard about it.
Father Durger is a giant man.
Yeah.
Think Thomas Aquinas. He's also brilliant. Really smart.
Okay.
He knows most things that he's forgotten most things that I'll never learn.
Right.
And he was accused of something by this one, I think it was one person mostly. Mm-hmm. And the things he was accused of, like that he'd gone up into the ceiling and gotten through the vents to peek down on the girls in the girls' bathroom.
Wow.
This guy would not have.
Oh, man.
That was one of the kinds of, and
that couldn't have happened.
It couldn't have happened. This guy was
like
huge.
An absurdity. Yeah.
So the bishop took him out. He had been the pastor at St. Bernard's for a long time. He did a great job. I thought he did a great job. And the bishop took him out, and while he was out, he said he's going to be out of office until pending an investigation. During this investigation, he dies of heart failure.
Right.
And people came to him and said, okay, he's dead now. What about the investigation? He said, well, what about it? And they said, shouldn't you finish this?
Yeah, exonerate
at least to clear his good name. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, he's innocent until proven guilty anyway. And I thought, well, that's just not true, because you took him
at not in the court of public opinion. That doesn't work
at all.
Yeah.
Right. Besides the fact that he wasn't innocent. You pulled him.
Yeah.
You took away his parish.
You didn't treat him as innocent until proven guilty.
And more than taking away his parish, he took away our pastor.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was, I believe that was Archbishop Daniel. It was either Pilarchik or Daniel. I don't remember.
Uh-huh. Okay. It had to be Daniel. Pilarchik was gone for a long time.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, we got some space stuff going on.
Oh, really?
Let's see.
I love
Comet
space stuff.
C2019Y4 Atlas appears to have disintegrated. The comet that I guess we had seen in 2019, the Y4 comet, and it looks like it's gone now. We'll never see it again. I don't know what kind of orbit that had. Like, maybe it was only one that would visit us every 5,000 years anyway, but we'll never see it again.
But they, how did they figure out?
I don't know. How did they know it disintegrated? I don't know.
Huh.
But they're saying it's gone.
Okay.
Let me see if I already closed all this. I closed my window on that. So there's a European probe called BepiColombo, and it was doing gravity assist orbits around Earth, and it's done its final one, you might call them sling-shots. They're not a slingshot, but, and now it's on its way to Venus, where it will do several more.
Oh, okay.
And then finally it's supposed to get to Mercury by, 2025. I don't know how close that's gonna fly into Mercury, But anything that could be in orbit around Mercury is pretty impressive.
Yeah, because that's so close to the sun.
It's right there. Donald Trump signed an executive order encouraging U.S. companies to mine the moon for minerals.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of minerals could be on the moon, but it would be neat if, we could find gold on the moon.
Yeah, well...
Can you imagine that? I mean...
Well, gold would be nice, but I'm thinking more like manufacturing minerals.
Right.
Because, that's really, you think of, people have been talking about like a space force. But that's really what it should be about is kind of establishing more of a commercial manufacturing dominance in space.
That's what would actually make space travel, possible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what would drive it. The government saying we're going to go to the moon, that doesn't really drive... It did drive innovation, a lot of innovation. I guess I shouldn't...
Yeah.
I shouldn't downplay that.
NASA really did, innovate a lot.
But you want to see fast innovation that... I mean, if anything out in space could be harnessed for profit, you'd see some amazing things happen really fast.
Right.
And this would be one thing that would really drive it. So that happened. I don't know if anything's going to become of it because I don't know what kind of minerals are on the moon. There was another one. No, that was the last space one. Okay. Bernie Sanders is out now. So
who's that leave us
I don't
with?
know. No one. I mean, there's that guy who's got Alzheimer's I don't know if he thinks he's going to run or not. We don't have it. I don't think we really.
There's no
I
viable
have to wonder if
Democrat
maybe
candidate. What is the
no
what is
Democrat would run?
Year?
Wouldn't that be weird?
That way, at least no.
Like nobody runs for president, and they say Trump is a dictator because wouldn't allow us to have elections. But it's not his fault. Everybody dropped out, except for this old Biden. It's a joke even to talk about.
It is. I know.
So, I don't know. I guess Biden's the only... Well, there's talk of Cuomo running. Or actually not even running. Actually just taking the nomination. Since Bernie hasn't really been elected by delegates or anyone else yet. I mean... They're talking about I don't know what's going to happen there. If I were a Democrat, I'd be so angry because they've completely ignored the real party, the blue bloods at home.
Yeah, the masses of the party itself. I mean, which, if they hadn't completely ignored the real party, they wouldn't be so, extreme on things like abortion and homosexuality and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to think that there are some real people who are Democrats who don't agree with that crap.
Would think.
So, anyway.
So OPEC is going to hold an emergency meeting. You've seen the gas prices. Gas prices,
they're low.
They're like cut in half.
Yeah. It's like, it's like, oh wow. Like back when I started
this was
driving.
Because Saudi Arabia, and this was specifically against Russia, started pumping oil into the economy, and in order to lower oil prices, in order to hurt Russia.
Oh, okay.
Well, and so OPEC wants to have an emergency meeting to try to cut the outputs and try to get a little bit more control over the. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. This doesn't make any sense, the way this is written. OPEC holds an emergency meeting to try to agree on output cuts. Oh, okay. Due to the decreased demand for oil.
Oh,
I see.
Okay.
We're not using as much oil. We have a decreased demand. There's no reason to pump
we're not using as much. Nobody's going anywhere.
Right, but we should be.
Yeah,
and nobody's working. I mean, the
open the
industries
country,
are
let
down.
people go. Yeah.
But Russia is saying, no, we're not going. If Saudi Arabia is going, we're not going.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And that is it in the news.
Yeah. I don't have anything in nonsense news except I came across this thing.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Good.
So apparently yeah, I can hear you. Apparently back in 1970 a 8-ton whale washed up and died. A sperm whale washed up and died on the shore of Oregon, and the State Highway Department decided to use 20 cases of dynamite to disintegrate it. They thought, oh, we'll just blow the thing to smithereens, and then all the seagulls will come and eat up all the bits of whale that are laying around. Well, apparently it went pretty badly. So this was back in 1970, and I'll get in a minute to why it's relevant. So it like blasted blubber. They had a bunch of spectators. You can imagine they got rained on by whale. There was even a big old piece of blubber that like smashed a car a quarter mile away. And apparently the upshot of it all is, in spite of everybody getting rained on by blubber, the greater part of the whale carcass still stayed right there on the shore. They didn't even get rid of it. So anyway.
So where did this happen?
This was in Oregon in 1970, back in 1970,
oh.
50 years ago.
I thought you were talking about Europe somewhere.
No, Oregon,
This
1970.
is in America.
This is in America. Yep.
Okay.
Northwest coast. Okay, so now this story has been resurrected by a town in England that's trying to use it to teach a lesson about social distancing during the coronavirus outbreak. I guess what they're saying is, hey, these guys, they could have just left the whale alone and stayed at home, and that would have been better than what they did. And so they're trying to say, therefore, stay at home. That's better than going out and living life and participating in an economy.
That's such a
stupid analogy, isn't it?
There's no
There
connection.
you go.
Yeah,
one,
I don't see
one more example of what do you get from a country who makes you buy a license to watch TV.
But you know what it is? It's what do you get from any bureaucracy? Because
exactly.
It was obviously a government's decision to blow up this whale to get rid of it.
Oregon State Highway Department. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And now we've got another government saying, "Well, they did the wrong thing. Let's all stop working."
That's right. Yep.
We're on the very verge here of creating a depression like we haven't seen, or like we have seen and not in a long time.
All in response.
The number of people who died during the Great Depression was incredible.
Yeah.
Because of, first of all, just because it's suicide.
Yep, suicides, and then
now,
then the secondary, the starvations and stuff.
I've heard people say you can't compare that to today because today we have all these things for people, unemployment and stuff like that.
No, you don't.
But those things were created during the Great Depression.
Yeah,
welfare was created during the Great Depression. People still killed themselves. What brought us out of it was when we joined the war.
Yeah. No, that's
when the suicide rates went down.
We don't have that today. We don't have the ability to absorb. Yeah, okay, yeah, you have unemployment offices and welfare offices and that kind of stuff for a certain level of population, but we don't have the ability to absorb the whole population into that. That's silly to think that's
insane.
Even going to be a factor. No, we're going to have, if we don't get the country back, turned back on as Trump is trying to, to do it. If we don't get the country turned back on, we're still going to see the suicides. And we're going to see the people who don't commit suicide, they're going to live the rest of their lives in financial ruin.
Right. I mean, You know, okay. The one thing that's really starting to get on my nerves, a lot of things get on my nerves, and a lot of things really get on my nerves. But the one thing lately is this: let's all pull together. We're in this together. We're going through this as a country. All these Pollyanna encouragements that I keep hearing. You guys are doing a great job. What do you mean I'm doing a great job?
No, they're not.
I'm losing my home. How is that a great job?
That's not. Nope.
That's not a great job. And I don't need any encouragement from you. Just let me go to work. Yeah. Now, I'm saying that, but I am going to work. I'm lucky.
Yeah, you're one of the...
There's a lot of people who aren't.
But yeah, exactly. No, that's...
And this fake encouragement
We're not in it together.
Is just stupid.
The governor's not sitting at home wondering where his next paycheck's going to be. The governors
are you going to feed my kids?
Executive orders. They're not wondering how they're going to feed their kids. We're not in this together.
They can do nothing for. I mean, they're not going to take care of the things that a job would have taken care of.
Right.
Or that they're not going to take care of me the way I could have taken care of myself if I had been allowed to go to work. It's stupid. Quit telling me we're in this together. We're not. Yep. You know what it reminds me of? There was a Barney Miller episode. This is the second time I'm bringing up Barney Miller.
I know, twice in a row now.
Last week too.
I'm going to have to go back and watch some of those old episodes.
There was one of the last episodes, there was an Indian who was protesting the museum digging up his ancestor bones. Mm-hmm. And so he's protesting and they had to arrest him and he's sitting there in the jail cell and this other guy comes up who's a Boy Scout guy and he says, I want you to know we're behind you on this and we do anything we can to help. And the Indian looks at him, he says, are you a lawyer? He says, no, I'm a scoutmaster. He says, oh, can't use a scoutmaster. I need a lawyer.
Exactly.
I need a job.
I need a job.
I don't need you to encourage me. I don't care what you think if I did a good job. I need money. Need a lawyer.
Yeah.
But the look, we got. I don't know. We can only keep saying this. We got to go back to work.
Yep. Got to get people back to work. That's what's going to allow us to survive this virus. I mean,
this virus who has killed 14,000 people in the U.S. compared to the influenza, which kills up to 60,000 each year.
Yeah. This panicdemic.
Those numbers speak for themselves. There's nothing else to say about it.
I know.
Well, anyway, that's all I got.
That's all I've got.
All right. Well,
so we'll call it here, I guess.
We'll see you next week. Hopefully, we kind of had to force ourselves to get on today. I really wasn't in the mood in the beginning.
Oh no, I was.
Oh, okay. I was like, I hope he says I just can't do it, Eric. And then I'm going to take a nap.
I gave you an extra half hour.
I know. And I pushed you a little bit because I was like, we need to, because if we don't, we're going to stop completely.
Yeah,
that's
but
how these things work.
Now you're glad we did, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Think about what we said, folks, and we'll see you next week.
And of course, circle the beads.
Circle the beads. Keep praying that rosary. Maybe we'll be allowed to work next week.
Yep. All right. Bye, folks.
All right. Thanks, folks. Bye.